My aunt seemed to pass quietly, but what she planned before her death turned her funeral into a reckoning 40 years in the making. I was knee-deep in garden soil on the day Aunt Vivien passed away, planting the heirloom roses she had given me as a birthday present. Before I eventually took off my gloves to answer my phone, it buzzed 3 times. The formal voice said Miss Whitmore and I didn't recognize it. "This is Graham Ellison, your Aunt Vivien's attorney. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart stopped beating. Suddenly, the roses which were Vivien's final present to me seemed heavy in my palms. "What happened?" "Your aunt passed away in her sleep last night," he paused. "She left explicit instructions for me to contact you first, before anyone else in the family." His words scarcely registered as I dropped to my knees on the ground. Aunt Vivien was no longer with me. She had taught me to read, gave me chocolate chip cookies during gloomy family gatherings, and encouraged me to pursue all of my dreams. "Miss Whitmore, are you there?" "Yes," I said. "I'm here. What do you need me to do?" "Your aunt left specific instructions about her funeral arrangements," and a further pause, "and she left you a letter that must be opened before the service. Would you be able to come to my office today?" I glanced down at the roses, Vivien's favourite, the Queen Elizabeth variety. Just 2 weeks prior, with her eyes sparkling with her typical mischievousness, she had given them to me. These have been in my family for generations. She'd stated just like secrets. I assumed it was simply another of her cryptic remarks at the moment. I wasn't so sure now. "I'll be there in an hour," I informed the lawyer. With its dark wood, leather-bound books and a view of the city skyline, Graham Ellison's office was exactly what you would expect from someone who dealt with ancient money. It was also likely more expensive than my annual wage. As I walked in, he stood there, grinning sympathetically. "Miss Whitmore, thank you for coming so quickly. Please have a seat." I tried not to fidget as I sat in one of the luxurious leather chairs. "Mr. Ellison, what's this about? Why did Aunt Vivien want you to contact me first?" After opening his desk drawer, he took out 2 envelopes. One had the letterhead of the legal firm and was hefty and official looking. My name was inscribed in Vivien's exquisite handwriting on the smaller cream-coloured one. Ellison said, "Your aunt was an unusual woman with caution. Brilliant in business, but also quite particular about how things should be done. She left very specific instructions about her will and her funeral arrangements." "Softly, that sounds like her," I remarked. The cream envelope was slid across the desk by him. "She wanted you to read this privately, then we can discuss the rest." Upon picking up the envelope, my hands began to shake a little. The paper still held Vivien's unique scent of vanilla and roses. I cautiously opened it and took out one sheet of her own stationery. "My beloved Clara," it read, "I'm finally out of time. If you're reading this, don't be depressed. I've lived the life I've always desired more than most people can claim. But my sweet niece, I need one last favour from you. You will have to read a letter at my funeral that will forever alter our family. It's in the secret compartment of my jewellery box, which I taught you to access when you were 12 years old. Do you recall the rose carving trick? While some may refer to this as retaliation, I would rather think of it as justice. Perhaps long overdue, but justice nonetheless. I've really left everything to you. My personal assets, Ashcraftoft Industries, everything. There is one requirement, though. You have to read that letter at my funeral when my whole family is there. There are no exceptions. I realize this is a lot to ask, particularly at this moment. But Clara, you've always been the one with the integrity and strength. It must therefore be you. With all of my affection, Vivien. P. So, don't allow them to cover me with beige. You are aware of my feelings regarding beige." I glanced up at Ellison after reading the letter again. "She left everything to me?" He opened the official mail and nodded. "Ashcraftoft Industries. Her personal estate investment portfolios approximately $75 million in total assets. But as she mentioned, it's conditional on you fulfilling her final request. My mind whirled. Although Vivien had always been giving to me, this was more than I could have ever dreamed. What about the rest of the family? My father, my cousins. There are some small bequests, but the bulk of the estate is yours. Assuming, of course, you agree to her terms. My father, who had always been angry at his younger sister's success, came to mind. Regarding my relatives who had admired Vivien for years, in the hopes of inheriting her wealth, regarding all the family get-togethers, where Vivien had sat in silence, observing everyone with her perceptive gaze as if she were anticipating something. When is the funeral? I asked. Your aunt was quite particular about the arrangement, so it will be 3 days from now. The whole family is anticipated to attend the service, which will take place at St. Michael's Cathedral and the reception that will follow at her estate. I grabbed Vivien's letter and got to my feet. Then I should go. I have a jewelry box to find. When I arrived at the door, Ellison called after me. Miss Whitmore, one more thing. Your aunt asked me to tell you, you'll know what to do with the truth. Although it only took 40 minutes to get to Vivien's estate, it seemed like hours. My head was filled with inquiries. What did that second letter contain? What secret was so crucial that Vivien would insist on keeping it? When I got close, the gates opened on their own. Years ago, Vivien told me that she trusted me more than her security system, so she gave me the access code. The house was just as I had remembered it. A large Victorian mansion surrounded by immaculately kept grounds with Vivien's favourite roses growing on every accessible surface. I was greeted at the door by the housekeeper, Mrs. Langley. She was crying and her eyes were crimson. Oh, Miss Clara, I'm so glad you're here. She left instructions that you were to have full access to her rooms. Thank you, Mrs. Langley. I won't be long. On the second floor, Vivien's bedroom overlooked her beloved rose garden. It was sophisticated, yet full of unspoken whimsy, just like everything else about my aunt. Brightly patterned silk curtains, contemporary artwork, next to family photographs, and hints of her cherished roses everywhere. The jewelry box made of exquisite Brazilian mahogany, with elaborate floral carvings, was on her dresser just as it had always been. It was the tiny rose carving that covered the release for the secret compartment. I located it by running my fingers down the edge. Third petal, from the left, I muttered, recalling Vivien's directions from all those years ago. A panel at the bottom slid open with a gentle click. Another wax-sealed envelope with the words, "To be read at my funeral," was within. I lifted it up with a trembling hand. It was heavier than I had anticipated, and I could feel what seemed like images inside. I was tempted to open it there for a second. However, I was aware that Vivien had a purpose for whatever she did. She must have had a purpose for wanting this disclosed in front of her entire family at her funeral. After putting the envelope in my suitcase, I gave the room one last glance. I had never seen a framed picture of Vivien as a young woman standing in front of Ashcraftoft Industries' first office before, but it was on the bedside table. She was grinning with that sardonic smile of hers that always gave me the impression that she could see straight through people's facades. What did you know, Aunt? I said to the picture. What secret was worth waiting a lifetime to reveal? Funeral preparations and family strife dominated the following 3 days. My dad called 6 times, alternating between barely disguised nervousness about the will and worry about my role in the arrangements. My cousins bombarded me with text messages, each one more blatantly selfish than the one before it. I kept Vivien's sealed envelope close at hand the entire time. I used to pull it out at night and examine it, wondering what discoveries it might hold. What truth was so crucial that Vivien would risk everything for its discovery? Bright and clear dawned the morning of the funeral. I meticulously put on a deep blue suit, Vivien's favourite colour, and pinned one of her most valuable roses to my lapel. In my bag, the envelope felt heavy as if it contained more than simply paper and pictures. By the time I got there, St. Michael's Cathedral was full. Vivien had been a well-known businesswoman and philanthropist, and the Ashcraftofts were old money. A mix of local officials, business associates, and family members occupied the pews. As soon as I stepped inside, my father stopped me, his face tense with nervousness. "Clara, we need to talk about the will. Ellison won't tell us anything. Says we have to wait until after the service. What's going on?" I slowly looked into his eyes. "We'll all find out together, Dad." "That's what Aunt Vivien wanted." I tried to pass, but he grabbed my arm. "Clara, if you know something, let go, Dad." I firmly but quietly whispered, "This is Vivien's funeral. Show some respect." The actual service was exquisite, just as Vivien would have desired. Not a trace of beige. All of the flowers were roses in her favourite hues, vivid pink and deep red. The minister talked about her knowledge charity and commitment to improving the world. It was time at last. From the front pew, Ellison glanced at me and nodded slightly. I held Vivien's envelope tightly as I made my way to the podium, my hands trembling a little. As I turned to face the congregation, the church became quiet. Sitting in the first row, my father's face was a mask of dread that he could hardly manage. Like vultures waiting for their next meal, my cousins Miles and Cassandra pushed forward eagerly beside him. I inhaled deeply, allowing the aroma of roses to permeate the air. I could practically feel Vivien standing next to me, supporting me at that very moment. My Aunt Vivien left me a letter with specific instructions. "Before she died," I said, maintaining a calm voice despite my rushing heart. She wanted it read here today in front of everyone who knew her. Knowing that hundreds of people were observing me at all times, I carefully cracked the wax seal. A number of sheets of paper, and as I had expected, pictures were within. My father made a strangled noise from the front pew as I was taking them out. In the first picture, a young Vivien was standing next to an unfamiliar man. Both of them held up what appeared to be blueprints while grinning. The same man was seen in the second picture at what looked to be a building site, where the first foundations of what I now knew to be Ashcraftoft Industries' first building were visible. I read from the letter my name was Vivien Ashcraftoft, and this is the truth about how Ashcraftoft Industries began. I started reading Vivien's letter with calm hands and a voice that could be heard clearly in the quiet cathedral. This is the real story of how Ashcraftoft Industries got its start. My name was Vivien Ashcraftoft. Harold Harrington, a talented engineer and my business partner in 1975, is the man in these pictures. Additionally, he was the real founder of Ashcraftoft Industries. A whisper echoed through the assembly. My father's face had gone white in the front row. I read Harold and I met at university and so on. Our goal was to develop sustainable building materials that would transform the building sector. Together, Harold's technical expertise and my business sense laid the groundwork for the future Ashcraftoft Industries. I produced another picture, this one, of Harold and Vivien shaking hands over what looked like a contract. We divided everything equally as partners. We split the company's income, the patents, and everything else until Harold's death on the evening of October 15th, 1976, in what was reportedly a vehicle accident. My Uncle Graham pulled my father back down as he began to stand up. I read on however Harold's car's brake lines were severed. Thus, it wasn't an accident. After the police had closed the investigation, I learned of this too late. I also learned that documents bearing Harold's signature had been filed just hours before he passed away, transferring his whole ownership stake in the business to the Ashcraftoft family trust. I raised my head and gazed right into my father's eyes. A signature that I now know was forged by his business partner at the time, my own brother Edmund Ashcraftoft. Whispers and gasps filled the cathedral. My dad got to his feet, his angry face twisted. "Stop this immediately," he told them. "This is slander." "No, Dad," I answered calmly. "This is truth." Aunt Vivien left proofer. I produced a stack of papers from the envelope, including bank transfers, police records that had been buried, forensic examination of the falsified documents, and the original contract between Vivien and Harold. She retained everything. Why? My cousin Miles, who was looking at his uncle, my father, with a growing sense of horror, asked the question, "Why reveal this now?" I went back to the letter from Vivien. After 40 years of transforming this business into something Harold would have been proud of, I'm finally revealing this. Our success has allowed me to support sustainable development finance research and open doors for bright minds like his. However, over the course of 40 years, I have also witnessed my brother make money off of his crime and instill in his kids the idea that privilege and power grant them legal immunity. The fight had left my father and he had sunk back into his pew. I read on. In actuality, I ought to have come forward years earlier. However, the company had thousands of employees by the time I had compiled all the evidence. Edmund and innumerable innocent families who relied on Ashcraftoft Industries for their livelihood would have been destroyed if the company had gone public. So I decided to do something else. I chose to hold off to construct to ensure that the business would endure when the truth was eventually revealed. A yellowed envelope addressed to Harold Harrington's daughter, Lena. His only surviving relative was the last document I took out of the envelope. This leads me to my last admission. I have been following Harold's daughter over the years. Her research, education, and work in sustainable engineering have all been anonymously funded by me. I have seen her develop into the kind of ethical, intelligent scientist her father was. Although she has never disclosed her backers, Lena Harrington currently leads one of the nation's most cutting-edge green technology companies. A woman rose from the middle pews and more gasps echoed through the cathedral. She had Harold's dark eyes and resolute face and was roughly my age. Even making sure Lena Harrington would be present for this particular moment was something Vivien had planned. The second part of my will, I read my voice getting louder, leaves Lena Harrington a 25% stake in Ashcraftoft Industries as partial compensation for what was taken from her father. My niece Clara, the only Ashcraftoft family member who has demonstrated the same dedication to morality and creativity that Harold and I once did, has the dominant interest. I raised my gaze to the astonished faces in front of me. Vivien Ashcraftoft, keeper of Ashcraftoft Industries' greatest shame and co-founder, signs the letter. The ensuing silence was deafening. Lena Harrington then started to move slowly in the direction of the cathedral's front. She came to a stop before my father, who appeared to have aged by decades over the previous few minutes. I thought my father was a failure who abandoned his work. I never knew. I never imagined, Lena said, her voice trembling a little. After leaving the podium, I said, "Miss Harrington, I'm so sorry for what was taken from you." With tears in her eyes, she turned to face me. "Thank you for having the courage to read that letter. Your aunt, she was watching over me my whole life, wasn't she?" In her own way, I said quietly. She was trying to make things right. The hours that followed flew by. Unsurprisingly, the reception was tense, with family members dividing into 3 groups: those who insisted on going to the police, those who wanted the letter suppressed and those who just sat in stunned silence. Immediately following the service, my father vanished. It would be weeks before I heard from him again until he checked himself into a rehab center and confronted the guilt he had carried for 45 years. In the months that followed, the public learned the truth about the establishment of Ashcraftoft Industries. However, Vivien had been correct. The business was resilient enough to endure it. We started a new chapter in the company's history. With Lena Harrington's technical know-how and my dedication to Vivien's vision, when I stood in Vivien's rose garden a year after the funeral, it was in fuller bloom than before. Lena had come to our now weekly meeting where we talked about everything from our mutual passion for sustainable innovation to business strategy. As she delicately touched one of Vivien's cherished Queen Elizabeth roses, Lena remarked, "You know what's strange? I always felt like someone was looking out for me, guiding my career from afar. I used to think it was my father's spirit. Now I know it was Vivien. She tried to protect everyone," I replied. "The company, its employees, you, even my father in her own way. She just couldn't let the truth die with her." Lena gave a contemplative nod. "Do you think she made the right choice waiting all those years?" I gave the question serious thought. "I think she did the best she could with an impossible situation. She turned a company built on fraud into a force for good. She made sure you were taken care of, and in the end, she made sure the truth came out on her terms." Lena said, "And what about you? Do you ever regret being the one who had to reveal it all?" I remembered Vivien's sardonic grin, her cryptic remarks, and her quiet strength as I gazed over the rose garden. "No," I eventually said. "Vivien chose me because she knew I could handle it. She knew I'd understand that sometimes doing the right thing means facing uncomfortable truths." Lena remarked, "She would be proud of what we've built," pointing to the Ashcraftoft Industries building that could be seen in the background. "A real partnership, just like she and my father intended." I smiled, touching one of the roses Vivien had given me now blooming in her garden. She once told me that, like secrets, these roses had been in her family for many generations. But maybe it's time for new traditions. Truth instead of secrets, collaboration rather than authority. Building something together instead of taking from each other. Lena squeezed my hand. "I think both our fathers would like that." That evening, as I sat in Vivien's study now, my study going over company reports, I found a small note tucked into her old desk calendar. It was dated the day she died, written in her elegant hand. "Dearest Clara, if you're reading this, you've done what I asked. You faced the truth and handled it with grace. That's why I chose you, not just to inherit the company, but to make it better than it was, to make it what Harold and I dreamed it could be. The roses in the garden will bloom again next spring. When they do, remember that beauty can grow from even the darkest soil if we have the courage to plant it. With all of my affection, Vivien." I placed the note carefully in my drawer and looked out at the garden where the setting sun painted the roses in shades of gold. Vivien had left me more than just a company. She'd left me a chance to right an old wrong, to build something meaningful, to prove that it's never too late for truth to bloom. Tomorrow there would be meetings and decisions and all the obligations that come with running a multi-million-dollar firm. But for now, I sat in the solitude of Vivien's study, surrounded by the perfume of roses, knowing that sometimes the heaviest inheritances aren't measured in money, but in the weight of the truths we choose to carry. And like Vivien, I would carry this truth with grace, using it not to destroy, but to build, not to punish, but to heal. Creating something beautiful from the soil of the past. After all, that's what Vivien had done. That's what she had trained me to do. And somewhere I knew she was watching with that knowing smile of hers, proud that her final secret had finally found its way into the light. And in the end, Aunt Vivien didn't just pass on a legacy. She passed on a lesson that truth has a way of rising even through silence. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing peace, standing tall, and living well. If you've been betrayed, know this. Healing starts with boundaries, self-respect, and letting go with dignity. You deserve more than the weight of someone else's lies. So tell me, have you ever turned pain into power? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk, heal, and rise together.